So we see this comparison a lot, that the U.S. is alone or nearly alone among Western democracies in not having universal health care or guaranteed paid parental leave or any of many other perks of a more socialist government. But the question is why? What makes the U.S. different? And the way I tend to frame this to my students is, why is there no socialism in the U.S.? The great Eric Foner question, and there's a one-word answer, Kai. I'm looking at you, my friend.
Let me see. Could it be race?
Could it be? I mean, that becomes the kind of standard story, right, is that in this country, race and racial privilege has trumped class identity as a way of organizing our politics.
Well, I mean, so we could go way back, right? I mean, if we're talking about capitalism in the first instance, the whole system globally was built on slavery. The modern economy was built. The cotton was built on cotton, which was built on financing slaves. And so, from that moment forward, we've been in a discussion about capitalism in the United States that has, in fact, sorted people by race. And you can't. And so, when we get back to sort of the public investments that we make in people, and that part of democratic socialism, that has been challenged and difficult, particularly in modern times, because coming out of the Great Society, coming out of the mid-20th century, we have had a politics that makes those public investments giveaways to black people.
Well, in the past, the Afro-American or American Negro intellectual perhaps permitted himself to be used in a way that wasn't really beneficial to the overall Afro-American struggle. But I think today these intellectuals have begun to undertake a new appraisal of the problem, looking at it as it actually is, and are beginning to see it more in the international context and the relation that it has with the African struggle. And the African intellectual is beginning to look at the problem in the African context and see that what might be good in one country, in order for it to be used in another country, has to be rearranged. You take African socialism. Many of the African intellectuals that have analyzed the approach of socialism are beginning to see where the African has to use a form of socialism that fits into the African context, whereas the form that is used in a European country might be good for that particular European country. It doesn't fit as well into the African context.
You call yourself a democratic socialist. How can any kind of socialist win a general election in the United States?
Well, we're going to win because first we're going to explain what democratic socialism is. And what democratic socialism is about is saying that it is immoral and wrong that the top 1/10 of 1% in this country own almost 90%, own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That it is wrong today in a rigged economy that 57% of all new income is going to the top 1%. That when you look around the world, you see every other major country providing health care to all people as a right, except the United States. You see every other major country saying to moms that when you have a baby, we're not going to separate you from your newborn baby because we are going to have medical and family paid leave like every other country on earth. Those are some of the principles that I believe in, and I think we should look to countries like Denmark, like Sweden, and Norway, and learn from what they have accomplished for their working people. Republicans win when there is a low voter turnout, and that is what happened last November. 63% of the American people didn't vote, Anderson. 80% of young people didn't vote. We are bringing out huge turnouts and creating excitement all over this country. Democrats at the White House on down will win when there is excitement and a large voter turnout, and that is what this campaign is doing.
You don't consider yourself a capitalist, though.
Do I consider myself part of the casino capitalist process by which so few have so much and so many have so little, by which Wall Street, greed and recklessness wreck this economy? No, I don't. I believe in a society where all people do well, not just a handful of billionaires.
No word strikes more fear into the heart of Fox News anchors. No 4 syllables shakes the 1% more to its core than socialism.
The problem with socialism is
why would President Obama want America to be more socialist than capitalist?
43% of 18 to 29-year-olds think socialism is okay.
Socialism is a dirty word in American politics. It's lobbed at presidents to try and tear them down and used by outsiders to set them apart. But what is it? Socialism is a political and economic theory of social organization that advocates the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. There are many different types of socialists, but the main idea is that the rich and the powerful don't get to call all the shots when it comes to the economy. But here's the thing that no one will tell you. America is already socialist. Here's why. Americans work like socialists. You know those 2 days a week where your boss can't berate you? What are they called? The weekend. The weekend was never part of big business's plan. It was fought for and won by the labor movement of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a labor movement that was full of socialists. In 1938, Congress passed the Fair Labor Standards Act. It established a 40-hour work week, minimum wage, and eliminated child labor, which is a good thing, unless you run a sweatshop. Some of the most remarkable Americans, maybe even some of your heroes, were socialists. Mark Twain, Ernest Hemingway, Jack London, Cesar Chavez, Helen Keller, even Harry Houdini was a socialist. Now America has Bernie Sanders, who calls himself a democratic socialist, and Danny Glover, who's so down. But I'm still waiting on Lethal Weapon 5, the picket line. Whenever you get on a highway, drive over a bridge, use electricity from a dam, or go to a school or hospital, you're probably partaking in American socialism. To pull the country out of the Great Depression, over 30,000 public works programs were sponsored by the government under Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal. Infrastructure that's now crumbling even with President Obama's 2009 economic stimulus package, which tried to pull us out of the most recent Wall Street-induced financial meltdown. But the New Deal wasn't labeled socialism except by its critics. FDR defended it, saying, "The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, it is whether we provide enough for those who have little." The New Deal also included unemployment insurance and Social Security, making sure that you can get back on your feet when you lose your job and you're taken care of when you get old and crotchety. You could call it big government socialism or just looking out for one another. The military, the one area of spending no one would dare call socialist, and yet it's largely funded by you, the taxpayer. Strange for all the wars the U.S. has fought trying to stop the spread of socialist ideas, you'd think that war was a capitalist venture. Around 27% of your tax dollar goes to fund the biggest and most expensive military in the world, with a budget of $598.5 billion. Compare that to spending on unemployment, Social Security, education, science, and infrastructure, and it looks like the military is red all over. Good God, y'all. Welfare is also one of those things that's bad-mouthed for being socialist, because why take care of the needy? But what about corporate welfare? Since 2000, Uncle Sam has given $68 billion in business grants and tax credits, 2/3 of which has gone to large corporations. Transportation and energy are the biggest beneficiaries. Even some of the biggest corporations like Walmart encourage their employees to use food stamps and other government services because apparently the most profitable corporation in the world can't pay a livable wage. It's almost like socialism is fine if it helps the rich, but terrible if it helps everyone else. In the end of the day, socialism is as American as apple pie, bought at a Walmart with food stamps.
You take African socialism. Many of the African intellectuals that have analyzed the approach of socialism are beginning to see where the African has to use a form of socialism that fits into the African context.
My question for the candidates is, do Black lives matter or do all lives matter?
The question from Arthur in Des Moines
there we
is,
go.
do Black lives matter or do all lives matter? Let's put that question to Senator Sanders.
Black lives matter. And the reason those words matter is the African American community knows that on any given day, some innocent person like Sandra Bland can get into a car, and then 3 days later, she's going to end up dead in jail, or their kids are going to get shot. We need to combat institutional racism from top to bottom, and we need major, major reforms in a broken criminal justice system in which we have more people in jail than China. And I intend to tackle that issue to make sure that our people have education and jobs rather than jail cells.
Here's the simple truth, that in America we have millions and millions of working people who are working hard but are not making enough money to put bread on the table or to take care of their kids, and that has got to end.
Today, all over America, you got mom working, you got dad working, occasionally you have the kids working, and we still don't have enough money to pay the bills. Something is fundamentally wrong about that. The problems we face did not come down from the heavens. They are made by bad human decisions. And good human decisions can change them. It is time that the United States of America join the rest of the industrialized world and guaranteed health care to all people as a right, not a privilege. Given the incredible wealth and income inequality in America today, we need fair elections, which means public funding of elections. My Republican friends just decided to put another $38 billion into the military. Maybe we can cut military spending a little bit and put it into education. 100 years ago, women didn't even have the right to vote. Change takes place because people struggle. Within the next month, I will introduce legislation that will make every public college and public university tuition free. I am in this business because I have 4 beautiful kids and I have 7 beautiful grandchildren. And like you, I want to make sure that the world that we leave them is a beautiful world where people can live full and dignified lives. I don't want to see a world where people are struggling and stepping all over each other. And we can do it. We can provide health care to all of our people. We can create decent paying jobs. We can reverse climate change and transform our energy system. We can raise wages. We can make sure that every person in this country gets the education they need and desire. This is not some type of utopian dream. It can happen. It really can. But it will not happen unless we stand up and fight back for not only ourselves, but for our kids and future generations. Let's do it.
I want to tell you the moment when, for me, Bernie Sanders won last night's debate. The question was asked, what is the greatest national security threat to the United States? The other candidates gave answers like the crisis in the Middle East, nuclear Iran, ISIS, cyber warfare, offensive tweets, all legitimate threats, to be sure. But Senator Sanders was the only person on that stage who gave the correct answer, climate change. Of all of our biggest challenges, from social inequality to healthcare, this is the one that must go immediately to the front of the line, because it is the only one with a non-negotiable timetable. He's the only candidate who truly, on either side, who truly seems to grasp the magnitude of the catastrophe. You can hear it in his voice when he speaks on the subject. So while it would be way funnier if Trump won, it will be far better for the health of the country if Bernie Sanders is the next president of the United States. This man is special, and here's one reason why. For years, I have privately thought to myself, all right, I am a capitalist. I like eating its sugarfish. I like drinking Fiji water. I like going on Amazon.com on my phone and then sitting up 2 hours later and $6,000 later with a stack of Blu-rays, a box of Cadbury cream eggs, and a trombone waiting for me at my front door. But doesn't it seem that things have swung so far in one direction, with the top 1% of the country controlling more wealth than the other 99% combined, that just a little bit of democratic socialism maybe is not the worst idea? Take healthcare. Look, I still want to go to my fancy Beverly Hills doctor. I'm not going to lie, but what about the guy who can't afford it? Can't we both have options? That's why it's called a public option. We're all in this together. I said it when I was broke in '95, and I will say it, I'm serious, and I will say it now. Everything can't always just be about money. It's like cooking. And I know, because cooking is personally something I have seen done a few times in my life. And if the soup gets too watery, you add salt. If it's too salty, you add water. It's time to add a little bit of water, I think. The right has done a marvelous job of convincing many Americans that socialism is a bad word. Look, America will never be a socialist country, nor would I want it to be. But perhaps the greatest president of the 20th century, FDR, implemented vast social reforms before and during the New Deal, which is why your 5-year-old no longer has to work in a mill for 20 hours a day making colorful sweaters for Bill Cosby.